You're listening to Tukatalks, the show where fashion industry experts share real-world knowledge gained through hands-on experience.
Greetings. Welcome back again to Tukatalks. I'm privileged to have one of the icons in the design of a category called denim. You know, we have few categories which are never going to go away. T-shirts, denim, men's shirts. And the rest of the things are what I call the fashion items. The looks may change for the blouses, or the categories may change the dresses. When it comes to denim, it's a product that started reinventing itself. As we had in our last episode with Trent McLean, I'm privileged to have Stefano Aldighieri.
Perfect.
Stefano is a California native.
Actually, no, I was born in Italy.
Born in Italy, but
based
now
in
living
California.
in California.
Yeah.
Director of design for Seven for All Mankind. After the transition when Jerome and Michael left.
Yes.
I think you were with Levi's before that.
I sure was, yes.
Yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get down to the question and answers.
Thank you very much. Very glad to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Talk about icons in an industry. I think you take a pretty good spot right there.
Thank you.
So thanks. Yes, like I mentioned, I was born in Italy. I grew up there, and I had my first encounter with the blue stuff over there, and it was kind of funny because it happened by chance, as these things do, and I was headhunted to go and work for one of the really great denim mills over there, which sadly no longer exists. And when I took the job, I thought this is going to be the easiest job in the world, because denim, how difficult can denim be? It's all blue. It comes in 3 weights: lightweight for shirts, midweight for dresses, and heavyweight for jeans. So I thought, easy. Little did I know. Once I started, then I realized that it's a really difficult product. Really, really difficult. It looks so simple, and yet to make it good, it takes so much work, because there's so many things that interact, so many components that are natural and they're beyond our control. If you're making steel, glass, or whatever, the tolerances are so small. If you work with textiles, then it becomes a completely different ball game. And then when you start to introduce different fibers, and then we start to introduce elastomers, then it changes completely. Then you go into the laundry, you apply different washes, and all your shrinkages, all your tolerances go out the window, and you have to go back to the drawing board and start the whole process again. So I realized early on that it was not going to be an easy job. But I got really drawn into it, and somehow I developed a real passion for the product. I tried to learn as much as I possibly could. After a little intermission, I was out of the denim business for a while. I went to run a division of a large textile operation in the UK for a few years, and then I worked in Canada with Andrew Ola, the guy who eventually created Kingpins.
Yes,
probably the best show in denim today. And after that, I was hired by Levi Strauss & Company, which is still the #1 jeans brand in the world, regardless of what people may say.
Hats off to them.
Or think, yes. And they didn't really invent the product, but they made it what we know today as jeans. And those years there were probably like, I always say it was like going to jeans university, because I learned so much from that company that it was, I would have never been able to learn anywhere else. Just visiting the archives as often as I could was an incredible source of information and knowledge, because basically everything that we do today, they've done over the years. Like I remember going to the archives and say, oh look, we developed this new thing. And then Lynn Downey was the archivist at the time. And she said, oh yeah, I think we did that in 1975 or whatever. And she goes through the books, say, oh man, we can really not invent anything new anymore. But it was really an incredible experience. So,
isn't that funny that you mentioned to learn, you had to go back into archives.
oh, of course.
The purpose of having Tukatalks is really the archives of this business. Understanding the experience of people like you, people who come to this show. There's so much to learn, whether it was our mistakes or our learnings at that time. Things don't change very quickly. Anyone can see the trends. Looking at the trends now, in the awareness of sustainability, the environment, the natural resources that go in to make a product, it's creating a little frenzy among the younger generation who want to be responsible. Because we did in our generation things that was not complementary to this planet. A lot of technologies have gone into that, saving water, but it still is one of the industries that takes a lot of blame towards the deterioration of this planet. Let's start with a different aspect. By reducing the amount of units, or the number of units that we produce. If I look at the numbers of 2019, 100 billion garments were produced for 7 billion people on this planet.
Yeah.
But the worst thing is 25 billion garments never made it to people. They were not sold. So it was a lack of planning, lack of understanding the markets. And the 75 billion that went in is now going out into what we call the circular economy. In the last 4-6 weeks that I've seen, the traction, growing interest, and following the Jones, most of the retailers are now buying the old clothing back and reselling. That should affect the number of units being produced. Having said this, denim, as you said, is one of the hardest thing to not make only, but to fit. When you have a panel, let's say the front, and the top is being held by the waistband and the sides. So how do you adjust all those shrinkages? A little change in temperature in wash can have an effect on the fit. Yes, we have had lycras and stretchabilities and 2-ways and 4-way stretch, but it's become harder to fit the garments. What does that mean? That means two things. It's a hit and miss method to get it right, but then every time you get it wrong, that garment goes into the landfill. Product development, we end up making dozens of garments blank and then create what I call the look that we want to present. So the product development itself, more than 80% of the garments produced as samples do not make it to a human being, so to speak. With all the technologies available, considering all the challenges, do you think the time has come where we are going to make a garment for a person and try to make as clean a jean as possible with as little monkeying around with chemicals and with, I think there is another way of doing the same thing, creating the look, whether it's through lasers or through designing. Where do you think we are going with that?
You touched on a number of really, really important topics.
I wanted to give you time to talk about it now.
Let's see if we can, because we could be talking for days about any one of these topics. First one you touched is the whole sustainability aspect, and everybody likes to talk about it now, and it's become the talk of the day. I don't think many people are really serious about it. It's becoming a bit of a marketing gimmick, and people say, "Oh, I'm the greenest, I'm the most sustainable," but it's not really true. When you're looking at numbers like you just mentioned, 100 billion garments made for 7 billion people, that's just beyond any reasonable number. It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So we know that it's a huge problem. The denim component, yeah, it's not 100 billion, but it's still a very a very big number. And we're dealing with a product that, as you mentioned, is not exactly environmentally friendly. I always say that if denim did not exist, we would not be allowed to make it today because it's got so many things that are wrong. There's a few things that are happening. One is that people are finally becoming aware of that. And I know I'm as guilty as many of my colleagues in the industry. We've done a lot of really terrible things. My justification is that we did not know, and it's true. We were using chemicals that we didn't know were affecting people. We used processes that were not good to the environment, and we did a lot of really bad stuff. But let's just put it that way. Now that we are aware of that, if we keep doing it the same way, then we are criminal, because now we know what we're doing. Luckily, there are new technologies available that are really helping us to clean up our act. And in the laundry, in the dyeing process, in the garment making, where we have less waste, there's a lot of areas where people are making good strides. Having said that, I think we are all still trying to fix a problem, just patching up a few things in the process that is just old. We haven't changed the way we make denim in 200 years, 300 years. So it's always the same process. Yeah, it's becoming more effective, it's faster, it's quicker. We're wasting a little bit less, but it's still basically the same process. So I think it's time we start to look at the whole thing with a different way. The right approach would actually be, let's assume that it doesn't exist, and let's see if we can make a product that kind of serves the same purpose, but without looking at the way we've been making it for so many years. You mentioned the lowering of the quantities, and I think it's actually a good thing. We're making too much. I'm still waiting to hear some of the companies who claim to be so sustainable declare, my target for next year is to produce 10% less, 20% less than what I'm producing today, because that's really the only way to show that you're being serious about it.
The disruption that market commands is one thing. Certain things, like you said, history or archives. Take an example of Kodak.
Mm-hmm.
The Kodak moment
Mm-hmm.
was with photography.
Mm-hmm.
A 200-year-old company, nobody thought they could go bankrupt.
Right.
It wasn't that the Kodak went bankrupt. It took millions of people along with that, displaced them. You remember those 1-hour photos?
Mm-hmm.
The franchises, I remember growing up, people talking about, I just bought 3 franchises and put all my retirement money into that because
Mm-hmm.
it's making a lot of money.
Yeah.
But think about it, people who were making those machines, people who were making those films, people who were making those paper, and all the related stuff that goes, what I call the supply chain.
Mm-hmm.
By Kodak just closing, it displaced millions of people, and the amount of damage that it did.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lesson to learn. What are the 2 biggest industries which has the world economies? Apparel and automotive.
Yeah.
Both of them are sitting at a very vulnerable stage.
Mm-hmm.
Just imagine an automobile company. It's not just General Motors or Ford or Chrysler or Fiat or Mercedes. It's the number of people involved in the supply chain,
Mm-hmm.
people who make the components related to that automobile, people who live in those towns, people who service those towns, the schools, the hospitals, the shopping, all the people who depend on top which is the main employee of the product. And if that product disappears, what happens to all the people? Elon Musk did an amazing job 12 years ago coming up with electric car and really changing the paradigm of the automobile industry. No more dealers, no more service centers. That thing is a reality now. All of a sudden, the big giants are waking up and saying, you know what? We're in trouble. In the meantime, this guy already has the data, the information, the 12 years of driving habits of the people, what they need. He's been correcting it. We don't have those people. We have great engineers at mechanical level, the electrical level, the hydraulics level in the automobile industry. But the kind of talent that we need for electric cars, that's a different breed of people. What happens to all these people related? Same thing in the garment industries. We have brands who have major suppliers, who have thousands of people working. God knows I got customers who employ 50, 60, 70, 100,000 people. What happens to all those people and people who supply food to them, the housing to them, the schooling to them? They're all going to get displaced. And this is happening in such a fast manner. Last month, I met one of our customers. Interesting, we have a lot of demand manufacturing customers coming up. In the last 1 year alone, I think more than 150 companies we set up. But to my shock, I met a young man who had spent a couple of $100,000 to set up a factory in Los Angeles. And I loved his tagline, it is not small, medium, or large size, it's a size U. It's not SML, it's size U. Made to order, made to measure garment, denim. Interesting part, he's price competitive. Interesting part, he's going to make what he sells. That means he's financed by the consumer. And the consumer is happy because that's going to fit the garment. And when I met this kid, and I say kid, he was only a 22-year-old person who had zero experience in the garment industry, who relied on some experienced people in the industry and started this business. This is not a unique case. During my travels, I'm meeting people in Pakistan, in India, in Sri Lanka, in Bangladesh, in countries where we manufacture huge quantities, yet people are making demand manufacturing single garments. This is not just a fluke. I think it's a trend. I think it's a little fire that just got started, but it's going to take a lot of people down. What happened to Victoria's Secret? Billions of dollars are being produced by hundreds of thousands of people. They're all going to be displaced. Is this a reality, or is this something to be alarmed about, or is this something just a fluke? Where do you think it's going to happen?
Well, the industry as a whole has changed a lot, quite dramatically, actually. If you look back 10, 20 years, it's unbelievable. Because 20 years ago, you told me the largest retailers on the planet are going to be 2 European companies and 1 Japanese company. I would have just started laughing because I said it's impossible. But here we are today. You mentioned Kodak. Kodak is interesting because they actually invented digital photography.
They did.
And they didn't understand it. They didn't know what they had in their hands. GM created an electric car that was actually viable and working and everything 30 years ago.
That's right, EV.
And they killed it.
Yes.
Because they were afraid that it was going to be a competitor to the bulk of the business. Musk came in with a completely different attitude. He knew nothing about car manufacturing, which was kind of part of the teething problems they had. But he came with a fresh approach, and he understood that he had to control the the core of the product, which is the battery. And nobody else has understood it yet, because everybody else is jumping on the electric car bandwagon, but they don't understand that if they don't have access to batteries, they got nothing. They got 4 wheels and a motor, but it's not going to go anywhere. So the guy really understood the whole thing, because we came with a fresh approach. And our industry is changing a lot. And you mentioned all these large, gigantic operations around the world, which employ millions and millions of people, and it's true. It is going to be a worrying change for a lot of people, but our industry has been going through that everywhere. Because if you look back a few decades, Europe used to be a lot of labor was employed in textile and in garment manufacturing. US, same thing. It was all textile, big textile operations, big factories, big numbers of people employed in the apparel manufacturing. And then it started shifting east and south into other regions. It's the easiest way to employ a lot of people. If you look at India, you're very familiar with India. India, I think they've already decided that that's not the future of the country. It is employing millions of people today, but they're not really investing that much in that sector. The fact that they're not pushing to get preferential trade deals with other countries in apparel, that they're not really investing that much in technology there, is because I think they're already looking at the next thing, and that's going to happen pretty much everywhere. China is going through the same
Absolutely.
the same process. So bad or good, time will tell. Yes, there will be people who will suffer from the change, but there will be a lot of people who will learn different skills and be employed in other areas. And let's not forget that if we actually do finally shift into a more circular economy, we're going to see a lot of new jobs being created that do not exist today. And when we start recycling and reusing our raw materials instead of dumping everything and making it again, we'll have probably fewer mills who produce new fabric, but there's going to be less use of natural resources, because you don't need to use so much cotton if you start reusing what you already have.
Correct.
And same with other textiles as well. And same with garment manufacturing. If you can take old garments and recover some of the panels and make new garments out of those, or if you can reuse the fabric there, then immediately you created a segment that never existed. So we're going to see a shift, of course, and the people who understand the shift and move faster, they'll be at an advantage.
Do you believe, and again, I keep thinking about it, as the population grows and the clean land, which can be used to grow food, which is not contaminated land, we're going to need more food for the people. Just a kilo of yarn in cotton, if you look at the amount of resources that go in, there's a lot of R&D going on in petroleum-based products. As the demand for petroleum products in the automobile declines, I think there will be an increase in man-made fibers, which take less resources, energy, can be handled in less number of washes as it requires with the regular garments. How soon do you think we will start seeing the impact? Because I see nanotechnologies, I see in the fabrics a lot of new development going on. As we keep decreasing the demand for cotton, the increase may be going towards poly-based, man-made fibers. Do you feel that a day can come very quickly when we will see the chunk of clothing being made by man-made fibers rather than this?
Well, honestly, I hope not, because you're basically replacing one problem with another. Because the oil dependency is just as bad as dependency on cotton. And the use of synthetic fibers introduces a lot of other issues. The manufacturing process is not clean. the release of microfibers every time we wash the garments is becoming a serious concern for everybody. But you're right. Eventually, we have to shift a lot of the land from growing cotton for our garments to food, because people need to eat. It's more important to feed people than to give a new pair of jeans. But I don't see cotton disappearing. I think we need to reduce the dependence on virgin cotton. It doesn't mean that cotton is going away. There's so much of it around us. We could stop growing cotton today and still have enough around in garments that are out there to supply us for years and years and years. So I think that's the big shift. There's interest also in other fibers, like hemp. Hemp was one of the kings of fibers until DuPont.
Hemp, bamboo, jute.
Yes,
they're all coming in
until the big companies like the DuPont of this world decided that it was a threat, and so they made up all this story that hemp had to be banned because it was associated with marijuana. So hemp, I think, is going through a real resurgence because it's really easy to grow. It doesn't need much water. It's incredibly sustainable because it can be replaced very fast. And now the technology is better, even in the spinning and dyeing, so that you can actually replace your cotton with hemp. So that's an area that I think we're going to see more interest in. The plastic or poly-based, there's nothing wrong with plastic actually, because if you handle it properly, you can recycle it many times. So
Correct.
It should have much longer lifespan than it does today. It's just we are negligent today because it's so cheap that we just discard it and make new, instead of trying to figure out ways to reuse it and put it back in the circular economy.
Yeah, I see just recently one of the companies in India which got a contract to make clothing made from recycled bottles, plastic bottles, for Australian Open. I don't know if you read about that. If we put our scientific minds and put all these phenomenal brain power to find a solution where we don't really litter the oceans, we don't really litter the grounds, the landfills. We're running out of landfills.
Yeah.
I was reading recently in Portugal, they sent all the garbage back because that had become the dumping ground.
Yeah.
Where do you find proactive people? We have to have some proactive technicians, proactive scientists who can go out and start looking for those solutions with certain objectives. We want to have less waste, we want to have less contamination of land, and we want to have less contamination of environment.
Yeah.
Based on that, how do we work? I think it's doable. I think we're underselling the brain powers. There are a lot of Elon Musk sitting there who have to start thinking out of the box and say, we're going to find solutions. Why is a country like India would come up with recycled bottles, plastic bottles, and make clothing out of it? It's doable. It's doable. A lot of airports now are not selling plastic single-use bottles. It's awareness. Somebody has to take that reign and run with it. Why are we all surrounded by reactive people rather than proactive people? Reactive people, when it hits that in your face, then you start looking for solutions. Sometimes it's too late.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's too late. Why can't we look at the trends and say, things don't change that quickly? You know, you can see the graphs, you can see the trends. And if you have half a brain, you can actually forecast the trends. Why are we keeping our eyes closed? Why aren't we looking at, why do I have to think at age 70 to listen to people who are still walking around with blinders as though nothing has changed? They are very short-lived people. They will not understand what hits them one day. And that day is not going to be that far. With the speed that things are changing, I think if we don't move with that lightning speed, we're all going to become history. And the young kids at age 20 and 22 will redefine what future is. We need more educated people. We need more technical people. We need to retrain our workforce. Yes, I agree that a lot of countries started their entire economies on apparel because it used to be the least amount of investment for the maximum employment. Well, if there's any lessons to learn, look at Japan. When the early 50s, we were outsourcing to Japan. While Japan understood that they don't want to make garments all their life, as they grew, they found their own poor. They went into Korea and Taiwan. When the Koreans decided they want to have their own poor, they went into Guatemala and Bangladesh and other countries. China today doesn't want to make clothing. No. They rather make fabric with less number of people so that they can have improvement in their own economy. I was not surprised to see Li and Feng now working for China government to find the sources of sewing machine operators, factories. And China's new slogan is not made in China, but managed by China. That thing is going to happen. Yeah. It's what we call progress. We all want to go up in our status, in our living, in improving our standards. But not at the cost of future of our children and grandchildren. I think we have to look at what is the biggest polluter. The polluters are cotton. Polluters are all these dye houses and the finishing of the products are like denim. Although there's a research being done, I think we just need to look at from all angles. Not only reduce the process waste, but also the waste of the finished products. So make what we need, sell what we made, use what we bought, and everybody's happy.
Right. Yeah, you touched on a couple of interesting points. One is the whole recycling issue. We've been sort of recycling for many years. We're not really good at it because very little of what we recycle actually ends up being reused. You mentioned the textiles made out of recycled bottles. I heard a really scary story recently that there are factories in China actually making brand new bottles and then use those to make the fiber because it's a lot cheaper to make a new bottle, grind it, and reuse that rather than collecting bottles, cleaning them, and then go through the process. So that's not being sustainable. That's just being tricky. That's just a greenwashing at a different scale. The waste issue is probably the biggest problem because you're wasting way too much. So that's why I was talking about the circular economy, where you make sure that the material that you use has a much longer life, and it really all starts at the design point, because we really need to start thinking different. We need to start designing product already thinking of all the aspects, all the implications, and more than anything, what's going to happen to the product at the end of its life cycle? What is it going to end up? Because up to now, we never really cared. We said, yeah, it's going to be sold eventually, and then people will use it, I don't know how long for, and then it'll just get discounted. Best case scenario, maybe somebody will take it and make something out of it, but it's maybe 1% of what is out there. So it's really a joke. And the use of resources is becoming more and more important. As we have more people on the planet, we need to be much more aware of what we're using. We all so happy when we hear that a laundry uses 20% less water, 30% less water. That's really not a big, in the grand scheme of things, that's not really a big culprit. The biggest one is cotton. You're talking about thousands and thousands of liters. Let's say the average laundry used to use maybe 100 liters to wash a pair of jeans. Now they go down to 80, 70, 50, 20. You can even wash with zero,
Yes.
like marginal amount of water, which is fantastic. Don't get me wrong. It's really great. But you look at a saving of 80 liter compared to 8,000, it doesn't even make sense. Next one, of course, is when you take your jeans home and then you start washing them every time you wear them. That's insane. You don't need to wash those garments so much. And the amount of water that we waste in there is just ridiculous. It's about looking at the whole design process and getting, from day one, when I design a product, I have to think, where is the material coming from? What am I affecting by using this material instead of that one? Am I using fibers in my material that are going to make it impossible for this garment to be recycled? Because now they stretch everywhere. You put elastomer in cotton, that's it. You can't recycle that one. You can figure out ways to use it again, but you cannot make new fiber out of that.
Correct.
So if we think upfront, then we need to really look at the construction of the garment. Say, let's make it in a way that it may be easier to disassemble. If you have 100% cotton, why do you use polyester thread? And then again, we have to throw away so much of the garment. Why do we still have rivets? Rivets are, they're legacy. They're part of the past. We don't need jeans that withstand 10 hours in a mine or working on a field for 10 hours a day. It's just an aesthetic thing. Do we really need it?
But that's a design.
That's a design.
That's
thing.
where you come in. You have to recreate new paradigms. You have to create new products. You touch base on recycling. I was in India recently, but growing up in India, the recycling was enormous.
Absolutely.
I still recall the street hawkers with a basket of utensils, spoons and pots and pans, and they would come in and the housewife would have 20, 30, 40 different garments that nobody's wearing, and these people would kind of qualify in their own mind what's the value in the second-hand or third-hand market and barter a piece of utensils, which was kind of a circular economy or recycling. I saw that in India, but I spoke to a lot of people, and in Asia it was a common thing. It's happening now where you're giving your clothes and they're evaluating the cost or the price for that, and they're giving you store credit to buy something new. So this is not something new.
No,
this was happening 65, 75 years ago. Again, I think the necessity being the mother of invention, why do we have to wait when it hits you? Why can't we be proactive and say, we are going to make the difference, rather than, oh God, I have to make a change.
Yeah.
People in your category who are creative, people in your category who are designing, you get certain materials, certain trims, certain trends, and then you work with those to create new products. One of the conferences I attended were all these fabric mills, but something very interesting, one person in the denim industry spoke about how they are getting incentive if they take 30% of the recycled fiber to mix with the 70% new fiber, they get a little premium. Fantastic idea.
Yeah.
But one person woke up and says, by the time these mills set up their processes to do that, it will cost them a lot of money to change that. But we, in our country, have been doing this for many years.
Yeah.
So we get the advantage. So again, going back to the creativity at the fabric mills level, at the rivets, some of the stuff that we constantly did that without really understanding the functionality and the changes that took place. Threads, why do we have to use polyester threads? Why do we have to add lycras in there? There are so many other ways, but that has to start from design.
Correct.
It is where I think people in your community, people of your caliber, can set new trends and say, this is the way it's going to be. Consumer doesn't know.
No, that's the point.
They get to choose what has been served or what has been offered to them. We at the design, development, manufacturing, retailing level, we decide the trends. They don't. They buy in or they don't.
Exactly. Remember a few years ago, there was a big change in the industry when eventually sandblasting was banned, because finally people realized that it was really bad for the people who were doing the work. And so the decision was made to ban it. And up to that time, we used to sandblast almost all the jeans that we were making, because it was a very quick way to, and people say, oh no, now what are we doing now? Now we can't make the same product. But people forgot about sandblasting, they moved on to something else. Now, unfortunately, they moved on to potassium permanganate, which is not really better.
Worse.
Which eventually is going to be banned real soon. And again, people will say, oh, how can we make jeans now that we don't have potassium permanganate? But there are different ways to do it. Maybe the look is not exactly the same. Yes, the look of sandblasting is not reproduced exactly the same way, but people don't care. If given a nice product, maybe it will have some resistance, and people say, oh, I really like that one. Well, too bad. That one is no longer available. So choose here. And very soon people will just adapt the new look. That's not we make it much more complicated than it should be. Because
what advice would you give to the designers?
Like I said, you really need to look at the product as a whole, not just look at the little making something pretty or thinking that people will like it. Think of the effect that the garment has as a whole. We touch in many lives. If we change very few things in our process, we affect the lives of millions of people. The way we source our garments, the way we wash them, the way we make our fabric, we really have a huge impact. And so if we are more diligent and we really start thinking about how we affect everybody else, then I think things can change rather quickly. And let's remember the end, where this garment is going to end when it's done, when it's finished.
Wonderful. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think people are scared of change. Of course they are, because it's easy to just keep doing the things the same way. We are accustomed, we are comfortable, but we can't be scared of change. It's going to happen whether we like it or not. So Darwin said it's really about the survival of the most adaptable. It's not the survival of the fittest. You look at the gigantic corporations out there, they thought for years and years and years that nothing could touch them, and now they're out of business. While other companies that were a little bit smarter, they realized the way things were moving and they adapted. Those are the ones who are winning in the long run.
I'd like to add, my mantra all my life has been, change is constant, growth is optional.
Right.
And change scares people.
Mm-hmm.
But that's okay. There's nothing to be afraid of. Because if you don't make a change will go around you and you'll be left behind. It's not a hard thing. It's not a courageous thing. It's a reality. The reality is we are changing all around us. Are we going to flow with it, or are we going to create the flow that people follow?
Right.
We just have to become little leaders here.
Yeah, being scared of things we have no control over is absolutely foolish.
Yeah.
Let's just see what's happening and just be ready.
By the way, I've been a big fan of your designs.
Oh, thank you.
And We have spoken at several conferences. I've always loved the way you dress and the denim that you wear. These are the products that you make where I would say they can be made responsibly and really show fashion rather than really create those fumes from lasers or chemicals or washes and so on. I think we are overdoing.
Yeah.
Sometimes simplicity in life can give such a beauty, and let's make it beautiful.
Yeah.
Stefano,
Thank you very much.
It's always
Thank you.
a pleasure.
Thanks a lot.
Okay,
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Tukatalks. Visit tukatech.com/Tukatalks to join the conversation. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. We'll see you next time.